It was a hot afternoon in the heart of Lagos, where the streets pulsed with energy and chaos. The air was thick with dust, the smell of roasted corn mixing with exhaust fumes from endless cars trapped in traffic. Hawkers weaved through the narrow spaces, their voices rising above the constant honking. Amid all this noise, a girl stood quietly by the roadside. Her name was Ife, and at first glance, she looked like anyone else trying to survive the city. Her simple dress clung to her thin frame, and in her hand she carried a nylon bag filled with small groceries. She had just come from the market, her face glistening with sweat, but her eyes calm and thoughtful. Not far away, a convoy of shiny cars rolled to a stop. Among them was a sleek black Range Rover, its tinted windows hiding the powerful man inside. His name was Richard Adeyemi, one of the country's most influential billionaires. He was a man whose name commanded respect, whose empire stretched across industries, whose every movement was followed by the media. But behind the tinted glass, Richard's face was tense, his jaw tight with impatience. He hated waiting, and the traffic only fueled his bad mood. Ife noticed an elderly blind man struggling to find his way across the busy street. His stick tapped helplessly against the hot pavement as cars swerved around him dangerously. Without hesitation, she placed her groceries aside and ran forward. "Papa, hold my hand," she said gently, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The old man smiled faintly, relief washing over his face as she guided him step by step. They moved slowly but carefully until finally, they reached the other side safely. But as Ife bent down to pick up her bag from where she had left it, her elbow brushed against the shiny side mirror of the Range Rover. It was barely a touch, a mark invisible to the eye, but in an instant the car door flew open. Richard stepped out, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the road. He towered over her in a crisp navy suit, his wrist heavy with a gold watch, his face hidden behind dark sunglasses. The crowd immediately fell silent, recognizing the man whose image often graced the news. "Are you blind?" Richard's voice thundered as he pulled off his glasses. His eyes burned with arrogance as he looked her over from head to toe. "Do you know how much this car costs? Do you know who I am?" Ife froze, still clutching the old man's hand. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. "Sir, I didn't mean to. It was just..." Before she could finish, his palm struck her cheek with a sharp, echoing crack. The sound cut through the busy street like lightning. For a moment everything stopped. The hawkers fell silent, drivers leaned out of their cars, and even the blind man gasped in shock. Ife staggered, her cheeks stinging red, her nylon bag slipping from her hand as oranges rolled across the road. People stared, murmuring quietly. Some shook their heads, others raised their phones to record. Nobody dared step forward. Richard pointed at her angrily, his voice filled with disdain. "Girls like you should learn to respect wealth. Don't touch what you can never afford." Tears welled in Ife's eyes, but she did not let them fall. She bent slowly, picking up her groceries one by one. The old man whispered brokenly, "My daughter, let it go. God sees everything." She forced a weak smile, nodded, and held the blind man's arm again. Without another word, she walked away, her head low but her dignity intact. The crowd parted silently to let her pass. Richard hissed, pulled out a white handkerchief, and wiped the side mirror as if her touch had tainted it. Then he got back into his car, slammed the door and drove off. To him it was nothing. Just another face in the crowd, another poor girl he would never see again. But fate had its own plan. That evening, in a luxurious mansion on Banana Island, Ife sat quietly in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her cheeks still burned, but the pain in her heart was far heavier. She was not a poor street girl, not in the way Richard thought. She was the daughter of Chief Oladipo Johnson, one of the wealthiest and most respected men in the country. She had only returned from the UK a few weeks ago after years of study. But she wanted to live simply, to see the world without the shield of her father's name. Dressing like an ordinary girl, she wanted to know how people truly treated others. Today she got her answer. Meanwhile, across town, Richard sat in his towering office building, surrounded by glass walls and city views. He had already forgotten the girl completely. His world was numbers, power, and prestige. He convinced himself that ruthlessness was strength, that respect was earned by fear. The slap was nothing to him, just discipline for a nobody. But the universe was already turning its wheel. 2 days later, Ife's father called her into his study. His voice was calm, but his words changed everything. "My daughter, there's something important you must know. Years ago, I made an agreement with an old friend. We decided you would marry his son to unite our families. The dinner to introduce you to is tomorrow night." Ife sat in silence, her heart sinking. She had no interest in arranged marriages, but she trusted her father. If he believed this was right, she would at least listen. At almost the same moment, Richard's parents sat him down. "Son, it's time to settle down," his father said firmly. "You're meeting Chief Oladipo's daughter tomorrow. She's educated abroad, graceful, and comes from one of the most powerful families. You'll thank us later." Richard frowned but nodded reluctantly. He was used to obeying his parents when it came to legacy. Neither of them knew the storm waiting at that dinner table. The next evening, the restaurant was filled with soft lights and classical music. Both families sat together, exchanging warm greetings and laughter. Ife walked in gracefully, her gown sparkling, her hair styled elegantly, looking every bit the daughter of wealth she truly was. Richard arrived moments later, his confidence sharp, his smile polite. Then came the introduction. "Ife, this is Richard Adeyemi," her father said proudly. "The man we have chosen for you." The air shifted. Ife's smile froze, her breath catching in her throat. Standing before her was the very man who had slapped her in the street. Richard's own smile faltered as he studied her face. Recognition hit like a knife. The same eyes. The same girl. His heart sank. The room grew tense as silence hung between them. Their parents watched curiously, unaware of what had just unfolded. Ife's voice trembled as she finally spoke, her words cutting through the air. "So, this is the man I am to marry." Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but her voice carried strength. Richard lowered his gaze, guilt crashing into him like waves. For the first time in years, the powerful billionaire had no words.